The first sign something was wrong wasn't the smell, it was the sound. Water dripping rhythmically onto concrete, steady as a heartbeat, inside a jail that had long since lost its own. On Rikers Island, you learn to ignore a lot. Shouting. Slamming doors. Metal scraping against metal at 3 a.m. But the drip? That meant only one thing: something above you was breaking. And on Rikers, when something broke, it never got fixed. Detainees on the 6th floor woke one morning to find 3 inches of dark water creeping under their doors. By noon, it was ankle deep. By evening, it wasn't just water anymore. It carried everything the pipes had been trying, and failing, to hold back. If stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe, because this one only gets darker. The flood forced men to stack their mattresses on lockers, tables, or whatever would keep them from sleeping in filth. Cells designed for one now held 2 or 3. One man slept curled next to a toilet that never stopped leaking. Another slept under a vent that blew nothing but warm, stagnant air. The smell of mold hung so thick it felt like a second layer of skin. The officers called it a temporary incident. But the detainees on that block knew it wasn't temporary. Every week, another pipe burst. Another door jammed. Another panel of ceiling tiles collapsed. You could look up and see rust blooming like rot on an abandoned ship. Inside one overcrowded cell, a detainee named Alvarez kept a notebook tucked under his thin mattress. Not diary entries, evidence. Dates, times, names of officers who walked past broken locks and stalled alarms. Notes about the hallway that flooded twice in 1 month. About the emergency call button that didn't work the night a man fainted from heat exhaustion. He wasn't an activist. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just tired of living in a place where the lights flickered more than the guards showed up for head count. One night, the power went out across the dorm. Absolute black, no glow, no hum, nothing. Someone shouted for help. Someone else shouted back to shut up. Without ventilation, the air grew heavy. Men pressed against the bars to breathe. Somewhere in the darkness, Alvarez heard metal grinding, slow, deliberate. Like a jammed door being forced open. When the lights snapped back on 15 minutes later, everyone on the tier saw it at the same time. A door that had been locked for months now hung cracked and bent, its frame warped. Nobody claimed responsibility. Nobody took credit. Nobody explained how it happened. But Alvarez knew what the door meant. Rikers wasn't just breaking down. Pieces of it were starting to fall apart in ways nobody could control. And the moment he wrote that observation in his notebook, something happened that would change everything. A guard saw him. And stopped walking. The guard didn't say a word at first. He just stared at the notebook under Alvarez's mattress like he'd stumbled onto a weapon. On Rikers, information was a weapon, more dangerous than a shank, more valuable than commissary. And a guard catching you with it could mean anything: punishment, retaliation, or something worse. When the guard finally spoke, his voice was low. "What's that you're writing?" Alvarez stayed still. "Just keeping track of the leaks." "Leaks?" The guard stepped closer. "You mean plumbing, or you mean people?" The question wasn't innocent. Everyone knew certain officers hated being written up, even informally. Alvarez felt pressure coil in his stomach. He slid the notebook deeper beneath him and forced a shrug. But the guard's eyes said he didn't buy it. That night, word spread fast that the block was getting hotter, figuratively and literally. The heating system, which barely worked on the best days, kicked on full blast and refused to shut off. The vents coughed warm, dusty air, raising the temperature into the 90s. Men stripped down to their boxers, pressing wet towels to their faces, fighting dizziness. Someone pounded on the officer's station window. "Turn the heat off." No answer. Hours passed. The heat didn't drop. Then the rumors started, quiet, sharp, unbelievable. Someone in the officer ranks was looking for a detainee keeping records. Someone was asking who talked too much. Someone wanted to know who wrote things down that weren't meant to be written. The temperature rise suddenly didn't feel like a malfunction anymore. It felt like pressure. It felt like a warning. The next morning, a man named Brick, a big, slow-speaking detainee on the lower tier, saw Alvarez wring sweat from his shirt and shake his head. Brick had been at Rikers long enough to read danger in the air. "You pissed somebody off," he muttered. "You better be careful who sees you documenting things. Some of these officers like problems to stay buried." Alvarez didn't answer, but he didn't have to. Both men knew the truth. Rikers had two systems. One was on paper, rules, procedures, inspections. The other lived in the shadows, favors, threats, and unwritten lines nobody dared cross. The facility's infrastructure wasn't the only thing collapsing. Communication systems went down for hours at a time. Panic buttons failed. Entire tiers were left unsupervised because staffing shortages stretched everyone thin. The more things broke, the more chaos filled the space. One afternoon, a cracked ceiling panel finally gave out during a downpour. Rainwater and debris came crashing into the common area, splashing across the floor like a ruptured artery. Officers yelled for detainees to move back, but nobody moved. They just watched the water spill in, mixing with old stains on the concrete. And in the middle of the commotion, Alvarez noticed something. The guard who confronted him the night before was standing near the corner, eyes fixed, not on the damage, but on him. There was no anger there. No suspicion. Just calculation. As if he was deciding something. 3 hours later, after the mess was cleaned and the block went quiet, a folded sheet of paper slid under Alvarez's cell door. No name. No explanation. Just one sentence: "You're not the only one keeping records." The moment he unfolded it, he realized the game had changed. Someone on the inside, someone with keys, authority, and access, was watching the same failures he was. And they weren't warning him to stop. They were warning him of what was coming next. Alvarez stared at the note long after lights out, tracing the single sentence over and over as if the ink could reveal who wrote it. On Rikers, trust was a luxury nobody could afford. A message like this could mean help, or a setup. Either way, it meant someone was paying attention. The next morning, the block woke to chaos again. Another power outage. Another flood in the lower hallway. Another round of men shouting for officers who never came. Every breakdown felt less like an accident and more like a system unraveling in real time. But Alvarez noticed something different today: officers whispering in corners, the warden's staff touring sections they usually ignored, and a contractor crew inspecting the blown-out ceiling panel with cameras, not tools. For the first time, people with authority looked genuinely worried. Not about security, but about what had been documented. 2 days later, the guard who once confronted him stopped at his cell. Same dead-eyed expression, same clipped tone, but a different energy underneath. "You're not stupid," he said quietly. "You've seen what this place has turned into. It's not just broken pipes and busted vents. It's the fact nobody up top gives a damn." Alvarez didn't reply. He looked at the guard's hands instead. They were shaking, not from fear, but frustration. "You're keeping notes," the guard said. "Good. Others are too. This place collapses a little more every month. And one day someone's gonna ask why." It was the closest thing to an admission he'd ever heard. Not guilt. Not apology. Just acknowledgement. The kind that comes when a system's failures become impossible to deny. Later that afternoon, another storm hit. Heavy winds pushed rain through cracks in the windows, soaking beds and floors. The vents malfunctioned again, blowing hot air through already flooded hallways. Medical staff couldn't reach 2 men who fainted in their cells because the intercom system went dead. By evening, the facility went into partial lockdown, not for violence, but because the infrastructure couldn't handle the weather. And in that moment of breakdown, Alvarez understood the truth: Rikers wasn't dangerous because of the inmates, or the guards, or the gangs. It was dangerous because the entire building was sick. Every pipe, every wire, every vent, every lock, each one carried years of neglect. The collapse wasn't coming. It was already here. Days later, an external oversight team arrived unannounced. They toured the tiers with cameras, scribbling notes as they examined rusted pipes, warped doors, and flooded cells. When they reached Alvarez's block, he didn't hide his notebook. He placed it plainly on his bunk. One of the investigators paused. "You documented all this?" Alvarez nodded. The man took the notebook with both hands, careful, deliberate, as if holding a fragile piece of evidence. "We'll take it from here." For the first time since he'd arrived at Rikers, Alvarez felt a strange kind of air move through him, thin, unfamiliar. Relief. Not for himself, but for the truth that finally had a witness. As the investigators left the block, the guard who once questioned him stood at the far end of the hallway. He didn't speak. He didn't nod. But his stare said enough. Some systems collapse loudly. Others tear apart in silence. Rikers had been collapsing for years. It just took one man with a notebook to force someone to listen. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.